Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the fantastic short film Red, White, and Blue. We are joined today by writer, director, and producer Nazrin Choudhury, along with lead actor Brittany Snow. And Nazrin, starting with you, I wanted to talk a little bit about just the structural challenges of telling such an intricate story within such a limited amount of time on screen. And you come from an amazing background where you've written for television in the UK and in the States so extensively, and I was interested in how that experience really translated over to the medium of short form storytelling and kind of knowing that you have a finite amount of time to tell a very complex story.
Such an interesting question. Thank you for asking it. I actually started life out in film before I transitioned into TV. But I do think that experience in TV, in terms of the multi-layered nuances that you need to bring, especially as you're having a long form series, that you need to always be thinking about story ahead of time. I think that certainly came into good use with this film. I have to tell you that this film, Red, White, and Blue, is a story around reproductive rights, but it's a very human and characterful story. And I was listening to the news last year, and then this idea just came fully fleshed into my head one morning. I went to sleep on a Friday night, woke up on a Saturday morning, and it was there. And I wrote it in about 2 or 3 hours. And I think what helped was having that kind of TV background, because if you watch the film, you'll see there's so many different layers to it. It was organically there, but the ability to have that experience in TV, meaning that I was always thinking about the story turns to come, meant that as I was writing it, I was able to implement that on the page. And then that carried through into set, trying to think through every single frame, what needed to happen, how we needed to land the character stories and the depth of storytelling that we wanted to achieve. All of that was, yeah, I think, the experience really helped me, given that this was my directorial debut.
And Brittany, I was so struck by how many small details there are throughout the film that just kind of give us more texture to who your character is as a person. And even just the fact that she lives in a 1-bedroom apartment with her 2 kids, and she's the one that sleeps on the pull-out couch in the living room and gives them the bedroom. Or when she's taking this road trip with her daughter, that she still gives money to the friend who's looking after her son, even though funds are very limited for her. And I was interested in your process of building this character and developing her, how you really went through a lot of the script details, and then when you were on set, even just production details, to really find those deeper layers of her.
Sure. I mean, I give credit so much to Nazrin to creating this world and writing this story, because when I read this script, I was doing another movie at the time, and I read it, probably within 30 minutes, I was already crying, and I texted my manager saying, well, I'm doing a short film, because there was so much intricacy to the characters, and in such a short period of time, you really got a sense of who Rachel was as a person, and her strength, but not only, topically, like her strength, because I feel like this is a story of strength and womanhood, but also just, I think that she encapsulates how every woman needs to be when they're a mother, and how much they put themselves in a secondary position in a lot of ways. And I think that, it was a really great duality of her being a woman that we could all relate to, and also being a character that I had never played before, and that I think a lot of people haven't seen on screen.
Absolutely. And Nazrin, I was struck by what you were saying, obviously, with the film being very much in response to even more restrictive abortion rights throughout America right now. And I think the film does a really fantastic job at having this much larger conversation by creating a very intimate and grounded and personal story, so it doesn't feel didactic in the way that it's creating a dialogue. And so for both of you, I was just interested in how you approached creating a story like this, and making sure it always came back to central character emotions and feelings to feel very personal.
Well, for me, just to kind of chime in on this front, but I'm really want to see the ground to Brittany to speak about that, because we were so lucky to have Brittany come on board. She was on very early wish list of mine, and the fact that I'm sitting here on this Zoom with her even now, having had her talents on this film, is just, I keep pinching myself every single day. This story, even though it's about reproductive rights, really in essence, I think is about what it means to be a mother. we're talking about protecting what is fundamentally a human rights issue. But it was really important. I'm really glad that you mentioned that word didactic, because that was far from what I wanted this to be. I didn't want it to feel worthy. I just really wanted to tell a story about a character like Rachel and the situation she finds herself in, and then ultimately thematically landing what true motherhood really means. And I think Brittany just she's a triple threat, really. I mean, she's directed herself, she understands depth of storytelling across all of those ways in which she tells stories, whether it's as an actor, whether it's as a writer, whether it's as a director. So to kind of have her come on board and breathe life into Rachel, to make us realize that we are really just witnessing the journey of one family in America that's affected by this, and leading with that, it speaks to the testament of her as our lead, but also the beautiful family that we created around this whole story. But I'll let Brittany speak to some of that, because she's so eloquent in all of this, on and off screen.
I need to carry you around as like my like pump up person in life. Thanks.
Comes very naturally, by the way, to speak about you.
Thank you. I think what you said from the very beginning, Nazrin, which was really important to me, and I think that we really carried that through within shooting, was that this was a very direct and very lean way of storytelling, in terms of nothing was said or done, in an overly explained or didactic way, which was preachy or trying to push a message. I think everything was really a day in the life, and something that was really clear. And so I think in creating Rachel and making sure that the story was really honest, we were really specific with and intentional with everything that you did, and I hope that I did. And I think that was really important to me, because it wasn't this overarching sort of, let's teach the world a certain lesson. It was just a day in the life with very direct, intentional purpose to everything that we said and did. And I think that really comes through when you see the short, because you really get a sense that this is just one day in a woman's life, and in so many women's life.
Absolutely. And Nazrin, I also love the fact that you as you were saying before, you wrote the first draft of the script very quickly because it was very instinctive in how you wanted to tell the story. But you also kind of talked your daughters through the concept of it early on, and then had them read the script. And I was just very interested in the experience of sharing it with them and their response to it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was writing it for them because they are set to inherit it, the legacy of Roe v. Wade effectively being reversed, long after it's no longer an issue for me, just because of, the very nature of what it means to be a woman. And so, yeah, I woke up, like I said to you, on a Saturday morning, and it was fully fleshed in my head. I knew every single frame of this story, and pretty much everything on the page that I ended up writing down is what you see on screen, other than adjusting for like practical locations and so on. But I went on a walk on that Saturday morning with my eldest and pitched it to her frame by frame. I think they've got used to just having a mother who's a storyteller. So they live stories all the time, because they are either seeing me like mesmerized in whatever script I'm doing, and talking out loud and acting these characters out loud, because I did used to act once upon a time myself. So when I write, I'm inhabiting these characters, because it's the only way that I feel like I can write authentically. So I took that onto our morning walk and pitched it to her frame by frame. And then the evening I was dropping off my youngest to a hangout with her friends, and pitched it to her in the car. And every time the story just landed with them in a way that they could see it. And because I knew they could see it just in the telling of it, I knew I had a story that I absolutely had to tell. And that next Sunday, sat down. I think it's the quickest I've ever written a script. I think Brittany just spoke to the fact that it was the quickest she's read a script. And I think I remember when we sent it off, we got an answer literally that day. And given that she's very much in demand. I did not expect to hear back from Brittany's team as quickly as I did, but I hope that speaks to the power of the story that we needed to tell and the reasons why we needed to tell it. Because, even the title, Red, White, and Blue, really is alluding to the flag that we all live under, the United States of America. And even though the story that we tell affects people in different ways and at different levels, depending on what state you're in, it is something that can affect everybody in this country. You could pick up and move somewhere because you have to for a job, and suddenly you're faced with these restrictions. I think Red, White, and Blue is alluding to the fact that this is a problem for everyone in America, actually, whether you have reproductive rights or not. Even if you don't have those rights or those issues directly affecting you, someone who it will affect. And then there's a universality of this story as well. I think, speaking to one of my producers, Sarah, who's been working on this alongside me, just realizing it also translates across the world. Reproductive rights is a global issue. And sometimes when you're overseas looking at what America is doing, you realize if that can be rolled back here in the land of the free, then it can be something that is going to affect women worldwide. So yeah, I think I've digressed from the question that you asked me. So please feel free to bring me back on topic.
No, all of those details. And Brittany, in coming back to what you were saying before about it very much is just this day in the life of a character. At the same time, you get to go through this really intricate journey of how does she respond to in a moment of crisis for her and for her family, and who is she going to be as a mother for her kids in that moment. And I was so struck by the way that she just very much internalizes everything. She doesn't want to pass any level of burden onto her kids of trying to figure this out. So we see just the quietness of, how long is the drive going to be? How much money do I have? How much more do I need to make in tips as a waitress? And so I was just interested in the experience and the journey for you and really answering those questions along the way of how she was going to respond to each step of the situation.
Thank you. Yes, I think that was a conversation that Nazrin and I had, which was that sometimes faced with these big life decisions, a lot of us think, oh, what would we do? It would be so hysterical, or it would be so complicated. But I think what was really beautiful about this is that it's so clear to her. And I wanted to make sure that in my, in how I portrayed her, it was very clear, although difficult. It wasn't something that I think you are met with, adversity in your own mind. You have to do these certain things. And so I think that it was really important for me to kind of have the nuance of the struggle within this sort of tea kettle sort of situation where you're feeling that, but you're not seeing it, because I think she's so clear in her strength. And I think that was really important. And I talked to Nazrin about that when I first signed on. I said, I don't think she's the type of woman that would ever show her kids what she's going through, regardless if it had to do with them or not. I think she's very altruistic in that way.
Yeah. I think you see that in the depth of Brittany's performance. We really wanted to have a really realistic, grounded feel to this story. And the camera holds on Brittany because she's so brilliant at being able to internalize those feelings, which you do in everyday life, but she reflects that internalization. And even as she's being very, stoic, I think is probably a good word, about the situation that she's faced in, when the camera holds on Brittany, you can see all of the emotions that she's keeping under control, and women have to do every day because they have to carry on living life for themselves, for their families, for their children. I think it's a real credit to Brittany to see all those layers and nuances of the performance that I knew I would get from her, which is why we went to Brittany in the first place. So it's a real credit to her and the young actors that we have, that they really felt like a family that we recognize, you know, in our own lives. I think across this country, they're very emblematic of people who are just getting on with having to survive.
And it is such an intimate way in which the camera really captures that kind of like necessary stoicness that you were talking about, at the same time as everything underneath the surface. And so for both of you, I was just interested in kind of the approach and the collaboration and working together between Brittany's performance and between the way that you've used the camera so intimately, Nazrin, with like just the shot choices to really kind of make sure that that carries through in every frame.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a few times, and we got together for a rehearsal in advance of filming. It was really an ambitious filming schedule. So we got to know each other really quickly in a short amount of time. And again, I have to give credit to Brittany. I think when we first spoke, if I'm allowed to share this, Brittany had just directed her film Parachute. And so I think I just really lucked out, because here I was having an actor who understands the process from behind the camera, and she trusted me and I trusted her. I think we had a lot of mutual respect for one another, and we had very open dialogues about just the life of this character even before she came on screen. Like, who is she? What's her story? I think it was really important for Brittany to three-dimensionalize this character. It's important for anyone to do that, but the level with which she approached that was just made my life easier. I think when we came to filming, therefore, there was just this already organic trust between us, and she just allowed me to direct because I think she knew that I trusted her, and vice versa.
What was that experience for you on the other side, Brittany?
I completely agree. I mean, I think knowing Nazrin's work as a writer, and also just the intensity and the talent that I read within, a short film is really hard to do. I think because you're thematically trying to bring together a story within such a short period of time, and you have to hit those arcs in an even more compact way. And so after I read it, I knew how talented she was. And then when we got together, we did have such a mutual respect, and I was just, blown away by the story that she wanted to tell and how she wanted to tell it. And so I was really grateful that she was trusting me, and she really did trust me, which I think is a huge marking of a director, that you're able to give away such a precious story in that way, to be able to say, like, what do you think, and have that collaboration, I think was just so lovely. And so I think that, yeah, we really worked together to create something in a short period of time in such an intense schedule. And it was also really fun because I know that we were creating a really intense story, but I had never been a mother on screen before. And I do have to say that I feel like I'm hooked now. I was like, this is the best. I loved my kids. Like, they're not my kids, but I felt like they were. I wanted them.
And they loved her too. I mean, that was such a great little family unit. Reading is just so sweet. He made us all pictures, I think, and especially for Brittany. And then Juliet is phenomenal in this. And I think for me, the story was always, really climbing into Rachel's skin and walking around in it and leading the story through that way. And, as you know, from having watched the film, that there is a story turning there. And it basically is written in for, I always knew that story turn was going to be the crux of our film. And just having Brittany embrace and understand what that story needed to be from the get-go. You'll see, she carries it, and we have a whole cast of really talented actors who help us from the very first frame through to the end to help us land the story that we needed to land, which hopefully reinforces why we need to protect reproductive rights, and there should be no question about it.
And that's also just love visually the way that it's so cinematic on screen and so specifically thought out in terms of the different uses of color palette, the way that you're using lighting in different locations and different scenes. And so especially as the story progresses, how did you kind of make the determination of what feels like the right visual aesthetic, at the beginning of the story, at the middle of the story, and then, I know we're being very cautious about kind of not giving away the spoiler partway through, but how you wanted that to shift and evolve towards the end as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly talk about from the get-go, even with the red, white, and blue, I had these images in my mind. We start with the 2 red bars of the pregnancy kit, and that's the kind of the red that is the first act of our story, and then going into the kind of brilliant white road trip, which is them crossing from Arkansas through Missouri into Illinois and landing the kind of white, bright daylight, and we go into the nighttime drive of like a mother who is having to get back home to her kid, but still be on the road to get this healthcare that she needs, and then coming into the blue setting of that clinic that she's had to drive, 8 hours and God knows how many hundreds of miles to get that treatment. So those color systems were kind of in there as markers of the chapters of the story that we wanted to tell. And then just visually, I work in TV, as you mentioned, but going back to my roots in film, I really wanted Adam Sojitsky, who is our director of photography. He and I had worked together on Fear the Walking Dead, and he's such a beautiful cinematographer. We were really lucky alongside Brittany to get Adam's remarkable talents on this film. We have so many wonderful crew members who, alongside the cast, gave us the, full extent of their craft and skills. You can see that in this film. And so he and I prepped quite extensively, actually, in advance of shooting the film. And I had said to him that I was so used to TV having all these pickups and angles and so on, and the camera's moving all the time. I really wanted to have a stillness in the way the camera was moving and to just hold on our characters and let them come in and out of the frames as much as possible. And because I feel like what I really wanted to land is that inner turmoil of Rachel and have that bubbling under the surface while letting the stillness of the character be a good juxtaposition against all of that. So there were all these very deliberate ways in which even the color palette, the tones and so on, to make this feel like Arkansas, to make it feel like the America that we all know and recognize and live in our daily lives. And I have to give credit to the crew that helped us kind of get that across, whether in costume, hair and makeup. Everyone knew what this needed to look like on screen because of the way that we wanted to really have the story lead versus, for me, I feel like the films that I admire is when you don't notice the filmmaking, if that makes sense. Maybe you're looking for it because you're a cinematographer, so you want to look at the cinematography, or you're a hair and makeup artist and you're like analyzing it. But if we've done our job well, then even those artisans of the craft are transported by the story, and maybe they go back and look at those details on the second watch. But we just want to transport you, and we want to, one thing that I wanted to say earlier to a question that you answered is it was really important for me to feel like, even though this is a short film, that you got the depth of storytelling that you would get in a 90-minute full-length feature film, but in the span of 22 minutes, but only felt like 5 minutes in the watching, because all of those things should just melt away. You are so inside the story that you don't even realize, much of the artistry that's gone into it unless you were to go and rewatch it. And so, yes, when our story kind of turns as well, in a way, there are many things that we do with our camera that are ideas that Adam came up with, that we then developed, or things that I wanted to do that we implement. And I think, as you watch the story the first time, hopefully you're not even noticing any of that. But if you were to go back, you'll see all these layers of storytelling, but even what we're doing with our camera, it's landing our story, but you're not supposed to get that on the first watch. Maybe go back and see it on the second watch.
That's such a great point, because I watched the film a couple of times, and it is a different experience the second time you watch it, because there are all these interlaced details. And to that point, Brittany, I wanted to ask about how you kind of made sure that you were very careful with your choices in your performance to really make sure that you were capturing everything that's truthful to the story, but not giving away full details until the narrative is ready to do so.
Yes, and that's my favorite type of storytelling, and actually favorite type of movie watching, to be honest, is when you're caught with a surprise, and then you have to, on another rewatch, understand that that's choices that might not have seemed, or maybe they seemed correct or right in the moment, but actually on a rewatch, you're understanding that choice that the actor is making is actually about something completely different. I love that, because I think as human beings, we do that all the time, where we misinterpret someone's decisions, and then later, when we understand their motives, we get a full picture of why they were making the choices they made. And I think with Rachel, I really wanted to make sure that when you did watch it again, you were very clear on the fact that these movements and feelings and the choices that she was making were all in service of the larger story that I had, in my head. And I asked Nazrin a lot of questions about, what that was and what the actual story was, and what, so I had it in my mind, but that it was never really explained or told. And I think that just added to the depth of the character, and really helped me kind of flesh out a full rounded human being and her struggle.
I was also so struck by the physical choices that you made in your performance as well for this character, because it goes back to that idea of the stoicness on the surface, but everything underneath. Because whenever you're carrying an emotional burden, there's a physical toll that takes on your body as well. And so there's kind of that, what does it look like carrying the tenseness? But there are moments where she's able to emotionally escape that a little bit on the road trip with her daughter. And so we see different physical aspects depending on where she's at. So I was just interested in how you really shaped and crafted that.
Definitely. I mean, I think a main focus of mine was the heaviness, like you were just saying, with her not only being a single mom and having to work and bringing her kids to her work, and just the toll of what that is, and the physicality of that was really important to me. And then, it was really actually quite easy to have that lightness with Juliet, who played my daughter, because I did genuinely love her, and we got along so well. We would go on breaks, and I would say to the crew and to Nazrin, I'm just gonna hang out with Juliet in the car, because we're gonna catch up and talk. And so I think that was inherent in my performances, just falling in love with these kids and letting the lightness of them pull her out of her heavy burden. And you don't necessarily get the intricacies of the burden, but then when she's with her kids, I really wanted that lightness to come through. And so I'm so appreciative that you felt that, because I think it was very easy for me to get that from them, just as human beings.
That's amazing. And Nazrin, in kind of speaking about those moments of lightness, I love the scene where it is just a mother and a daughter in the car singing along to music. And I was interested in just hearing a little bit more about how that in particular came together, because I believe it was an original song written by someone originally who is a family member of yours, but then performed by your daughters in the track that we hear in the movie.
Yeah, I had a placeholder song that Brittany will have read in the script when we first sent it to her, which was Girls Just Want to Have Fun, by Cyndi Lauper. It's such an upbeat song. I used to play it to my girls driving to school every morning and doing the school drop off. So I was replicating that. But, it's a short film. Nobody has the budget to go and get Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And it was the week before. I was like, I don't have a song. What do I do? And this family member, Toby Jepson, who is a lead singer of two notable British bands, actually, Little Angels and also Wayward Sons, he happened to be on a round the world trip with his wife for 6 months that they'd finally taken. And they were in LA the week before we were filming. And he was listening to my dilemma, and he offered up a number of tunes that we could have. And so I had my pick, but he's, the male lead singer of these songs. And I said to him, because I don't know if you're aware, but there was a very deliberate choice and an intention to only have female voices on our film. So every line of dialogue, apart from the young, the voice of the young, unadulterated, character that is Jake, Rachel's son, he's the only male character that speaks in this. And even the music, I wanted to make sure that we had the voices of those who have reproductive rights being able to speak in this film and to lead, the audio and allowing them to speak really in this film predominantly over and above anyone else. He basically gave me the song, and that week we re-recorded my girls singing the vocals because they're great singers. And they write music themselves. And yeah, somehow we were able to make sure that the artistic desire that I had to only put female voices in this, we had lots of really wonderful male allies who helped us tell this story, just to say that. But it was really important for me to just have the voices of people who this affects predominantly go through the film, even to the extent of the music in the film. Yeah, so then in the car, singing, and Brittany and Juliet, I would hear them in between the takes of that road scene in the car, like they would be singing beautifully and doing what they needed to do. But then, when we called cut, I would hear them sometimes just interacting in between. It was really lovely to hear, just to kind of go back to what Brittany was talking about, hanging out with Juliet. It was a lovely experience having that feel very intimate because of my girls in that scene, but also just watching them and their interplay on and off screen.
Well, I'm so impressed by what you've both created alongside the rest of the team in telling this story. You've done such a fantastic job, and I think it's testament to the film that it is something that, each rewatch will give you so many more layers to what you've crafted. So congratulations on everything, and thank you so much to both of you for talking about it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate your time, and thank you.